Thanks, Cal. Well, good morning, everybody. So this morning's message is the final sermon in this Gracious Space series. And I just want to remind you that if you'd like, we have these accompanying guides that David has really poured his heart and soul into. And so whether you want to come and get a physical copy here or access it online for a group setting or for your own personal reflection. So I just want to remind you that our goal throughout this series is to further learn how we can make space in our hearts and minds, for God to continue to work in and through us, for God to continue to transform us, for us to have grace for each other's different ideas and understandings and journeys. And as we do journey together, as we can encourage each other to become more and more like Jesus. This morning's message is about a man by the name of Barnabas. And I'm going to do a monologue. And this monologue is based on events recorded in the book of Acts, mostly from Acts 9 through to 15, as well as some references to Galatians chapter 2, 2 Timothy 4, and Philemon. Philemon only has one chapter, and Colossians 4. So that's kind of just where, if you want to know some of the specific passages, you can come to me afterwards and I can tell you some of the specific things. So in this monologue, I want you to picture yourselves. It's a few years after Jesus had died and rose again, and the church is being formed. And you are reporters, okay? Oh, hello. Yes, I'm Barnabas. Yeah, well, actually, my name is actually Joseph, but all my friends call me Barnabas. Why do they call me Barnabas? Well, I'm told that I have the gift of encouragement, and, well, my name, Barnabas, actually means son of encouragement, so you can call me Barnabas. No, not Barney, just Barnabas, thank you very much. So, what can I do for you? Oh, you're reporters. All of you? Well, what paper do you write for? Oh, the Jerusalem Tribune. Okay. And you want to ask me questions about Paul? My friendship with Paul? You mean Paul, who used to be Saul from Tarsus? Well, yeah, I have a story or two. I tell you, Paul and I, we have a lot of adventures. Oh, a lot of cool stuff that went on. We did a lot of traveling, mostly up north. We're telling people about Jesus. Yeah, Jesus of Nazareth. We're telling people, and let me tell you, all kinds of people. We were not just the Jews. Yeah, we went into the synagogues and talked to the Jews, but we were also talking to the Greeks and the Samaritans. We even talked to the Jamaicans. We were telling everybody about Jesus, how Jesus really was the man sent from God. Jesus was the one that, all the old prophets a long time ago, they wrote about. It was Jesus they were writing about. Yes, the Romans, they executed him. That was horrible. I think the whole world knew about this because he had all these claims. But you know what? Jesus didn't stay dead. This is what we're telling people. Jesus actually rose from the dead. Yes, he rose from the dead. And because he rose from the dead, he's given the whole world life, me and you included. And then he went off up to heaven to be with the Father. But before he went to heaven to be with the Father, he left the Holy Spirit, God's Spirit. He left that with us, with anybody who wants. So yeah, Paul and I, we're traveling all around, telling everybody about Jesus. And that Jesus is the true king, the real rightful ruler. Now, I know that some people, they thought that maybe me and Paul, we were something special. But we're trying to say we're not special. It's just God's Spirit who would work through us because we're open and work through us, and God's Spirit would talk to the hearts of the people. Oh, man, there's some really cool things. A whole lot of people were becoming Jesus followers. And you know what? A whole lot of people are still becoming Jesus followers. Oh, where was that? Oh, yeah, Lystra, up north. We went into Lystra and we met this guy who couldn't walk. Yeah, he was crippled. And Paul sensed in him that this guy had enough faith that God could heal him. So Paul went right up to this guy and he started kind of almost yelling. In fact, he was practically shouting, and he says to this guy, "Stand up!" You know what happened? This guy who was crippled stood up. Oh man, the people all around, they couldn't believe it. I was thinking, oh God, this is so cool. Some people, they thought it was all because me and Paul were something special. Some people were even thinking that we're gods like Zeus or something, and they started bowing down, and we were saying, whoa, no, we're just people like you. It's only because of God's Spirit. And we have to tell you that Jesus is the true King. You know, when you're traveling around up north, especially some parts of the Roman Empire, and you're telling people that Jesus is the true king, the rightful king, what you're actually saying but not saying is, and Caesar is not. And not everybody likes to hear that. When we say that Jesus is the true king, some people got really mad, especially some of the Jewish religious leaders. I think it's a well-known fact by now that the Romans kind of lined the pockets of some of those Jewish religious people. And so they didn't like what we were saying. In fact, yeah, it was in that same town, Lystra. Some Jews came down from Antioch and they were telling the people there that what we were saying was bad. They were telling the people there that we were bad. And they turned the people against us. They started throwing rocks. They threw so many rocks They kept on throwing rocks. And especially Paul, they pelted him, they stoned him. Then they dragged him out of town. And they just threw him against the side of the road. We thought he was dead. And by the time that we got to him, me and some other Jesus followers, we gathered around him. We looked at his face and it was all covered in blood. And we thought, oh God, what are we doing here? And then Paul opened his eyes. Couldn't believe it. And then he stood up. And we couldn't believe it. We just started laughing. Man, is this God ever cool? Is this God ever gracious? Is this God ever awesome? Oh man, sorry. Some of those memories just bring back emotions. Well, there you have some stories. I hope you have enough to write your article. What's that? You want to know if I have any regrets? Yeah, I got regrets. Well, I'll just put it plainly. One time, me and Paul, we had a fight. And we ended up splitting. I went one way, Paul went the other. I regret that whole thing. So, that's my regrets. You want to know the details? Oh. Well, how much time you got left anyway? 10 minutes about, eh? Okay. Well, you know how we all have different personalities and different giftings. Like, we all have different things that we're good at. Well, Paul, he is a brilliant guy, man, a quick thinker. And when he speaks, people would come, and he would speak with such authority. And he loved to debate. He could think of things just like that. But let me tell you, Paul was also opinionated, pig-headed, and stubborn. Oh yeah, I tell that to his face. Well, me, and he worked together with me, well, like my name says, I try to be the encourager. I'm a bit of a networker. I would introduce people together, and then I would try to encourage them to see if they can work together so we can get this mission done, you know? In fact, a lot of people don't know this, and maybe your readers might not know this, but it was because of me that Paul got introduced to all the folks in Jerusalem. See, I'm the one who brought Paul into the inner circle, into the head office. See, they knew that he wanted to come and be introduced, but they were afraid of him because, you know, he was Saul, who would persecute all of us Jesus followers. And I went to them and I said, you know, this guy deserves a second chance. Jesus gave this guy a second chance, so we ought to give him a second chance. Let him come in. Let him be one of us. Well, they did. And we ended up doing our first mission trip together. So we had a young guy, John Mark. He was helping us. Now, John Mark, I knew John Mark since he was a kid because a lot of us would meet at his mom's house, you know, for prayer back in the days when right after Jesus rose and left to heaven. We would meet for prayer at his mom's place, and we would do our planning there. So I knew John Mark. And John Mark, great kid, so he came along. And so you got to know, we're just getting started in our first journey. And I don't know why, but John Mark takes off. It was really disappointing to me. He takes off and he goes back home, back to Jerusalem. I was disappointed. Paul was livid. But what could we do? We had a mission to do. So we kept going. Now, it was about a year later. We had a great time of ministry all the way traveling around up north, and now we had reported back, and now we're back in Jerusalem here. And I had hooked up again with John Mark, and he came to me all sorry, Barnabas, and he wanted a second chance. And, I think the guy deserves a second chance. So we're planning just to go out on our second mission trip. And I went to Paul and I said, Paul, John Mark knows that he messed up. He knows that he left us high and dry. He just wants a second chance. Paul said, absolutely not. I said, Paul, come on, everybody deserves a second chance. Not a chance. He deserted us once. I'm not going to let him do that again. And I said, Paul, you of all people know. Jesus gave you a second chance when he met you on that road to Damascus. The head office in Jerusalem gave you a chance. This poor kid, John Mark, deserves a second chance. Why won't you give him a chance? Well, Paul was stubborn. He just stood there and crossed his arms and said, nope. I don't usually get mad. But for some reason, it just made me mad. And I started yelling at Paul, And I got in his face. You know what Paul did? He yelled back. And we ended up screaming together, screaming at each other. So we got so mad. We just went our separate ways. Paul took Silas, went one way. I took John Mark and went the other. So you want to know what I regret? I regret that. I regret getting so mad. I regret not calming down and working things out. Now there's something else that I regret. It was a little bit before this fight. I don't know, a couple weeks, maybe a couple months. I think we were all up in Antioch. Oh, things were going so good. We were all in fellowship there. We're worshiping God, all of us together. I'm talking about all of us. The Jews, most of us Jews have been circumcised, but we included the non-Jews who hadn't been circumcised, and we were all worshiping and fellowship together. We were ministering, we were helping out the poor, hanging out, supporting each other. Peter was one of us. He had come up from Jerusalem. Oh, we had such a great time. Well, a few days later, some of Peter's friends came up. Some from the head office. I don't know what happened with Peter, but he just flipped. One minute, he was okay to hang out with all the Gentiles. But as soon as his friends got there, Peter refused to even eat with anyone who wasn't circumcised. And then a bunch of us followed Peter's lead, me included. I regret that. I regret not having the courage. You know what Paul did? Yeah, Paul was mad. He called us out. He called us hypocrites, and rightly so, because that's what we were. We were hypocrites. And so when I think back, I really wish I had the guts to stand up for what was right. I wish that I wasn't so insecure. But this was Peter. This was Peter, the very Peter that Jesus said, on you, Peter, you are the rock on whom I will build my church. So I followed along, even though I knew I shouldn't have. I can't help but think, when Paul and I had that fight when we're fighting about John Mark, I can't help but wonder if Paul had that incident with Peter going on in the back of his mind, wondering if I was having second thoughts too. I really wish Paul and I would have worked things out. Then I heard, right after we split up and Paul and Silas went off, I heard that they had a really hard time in ministry, and that made me feel all the worse. So there you have it. You got some stories about some good times me and Paul had in the ministry, and you got some stories about some of the difficult times. I hope you're, what? You want to know what I've learned? That's a good question. Let me think. Well, I've learned lots of things in my old life here, but I guess the first thing I would say is it's better to stay together. If at all possible, I've learned that even if we have disagreements, whether we're in a gathering worshiping God or whether it's in families, even if you have fights, if at all possible, it's better to hang in there and work things out. It's better to stay in unity and learn how to work through things than it is to split up. But we're all human, and I know that sometimes we just don't stay together. So I think the second thing I would say that I learned then is that we are all human. We have all messed up. It doesn't matter who we are. I mean, look at Peter the rock. He ended up apologizing. Paul has made all kinds of mistakes. Of course, me and young John Mark. Doesn't matter. We all make mistakes. Which leads me to, I think the last thing I'm going to say that I learned is this. Our God is a big and gracious God, and He can handle it when we make mistakes. And that is so beautiful. Our God is so big and gracious. He uses our blunders. Even when me and Paul, we split up, well, God used it anyway. Because Paul and Silas did ministry, and me and John Mark, we did ministry. I just think it would have been better if we were together. But God uses whatever to His glory anyway. And the other thing is this. Our God is so big and so gracious that He can help repair broken relationships. And that's what happened with me and Paul. And that's why I can say to this day that Paul is one of my closest friends now. And even John Mark and Paul. Paul calls John Mark now one of his best workers. And it's all because of the grace of God. Well, I'm an old man. And old men get tired, so I hope you have a good article. Yeah, you're welcome. Bye.